Welcome back to Breakfast Central on News Central. And don't forget you can reach us via social media, #NC Breakfast Central. You can reach us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Not forgetting to watch us live on YouTube and log on to the website www.newscentral.africa. Now let's move straight on the show. Now, support groups for women are quite critical in our times, especially on the continent. Now, in Lagos, Nigeria, there is one such group called Wine Whine, which was formed back in 2018 by Dami Odufuwa and Odunayo, Eweniyi. Now, Wine Whine is a bi-monthly event, online community, and even offline support group for women and a social enterprise. Now, passionate about online media and telling engaging African stories, Damilola is keen to use digital media to fight for the African women's rights. So we have Dami right here in the studio. Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast Central.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Wine Whine. From the wordings, from the way it's spelled, it's wine.
Yeah.
Which is the drink, and whine, like whining and complaining.
Yeah, like when people say, "Oh, why are you whining? Why are you nagging?"
And it's supposed to be, a support group for women, right?
Yes.
So tell us, what's it all about?
Okay, so as the name says, Wine and Whine is to drink and complain.
Drink and complain.
Yeah, to drink and complain for lack of complain is a simple explanation, because we actually do try and figure out ways to create change. So we complain and then figure out solutions.
Okay.
But the name is actually a popular term that women use. There's even a hashtag Wine and Whine when women go out with their friends.
Oh.
So they go out, they hang out with their friends and they complain. And so I lived in the UK for a while, and when I moved back, I just felt very frustrated by little things in Nigeria.
You kept whining.
I kept whining, and I kept drinking with my friends, and I like-minded women like myself, and I found that I think a lot of women need a safe space and a support group to meet other women like themselves and feel like they're not losing their minds, they're not crazy, there is a problem, and then find solutions to it.
Okay. So how did it then start? How long has it been with Wine Whine?
So we had our first event last year in November.
Okay.
So actually the idea came from, I've always wanted to have a women's empowerment group, a women's support group. And at the time I used to work for a media company called Conbini, and I was talking to my team in the office, and I was like, I really want to do this thing for women where we come together, we express the real frustrations that we have that sometimes we're not able to express, and we figure out how to create change. And I want it to be fun, because I feel that sometimes a lot of these groups can be a bit boring for younger women, and I want it to be useful, and I want us to be able to create change. And then one of my colleagues was like, what do you think about this name? And then I was like, that's a great idea. I Googled the name and found out that it was actually a popular saying, and that's kind of how the name came about. And so I spoke to Odun, who's a good friend of mine, and I told her about the idea, and she loved it, and she was happy to come on board as a co-founder. And so we created the strategy and the plan, and it's changed a bit since we first started. But then we had our first event with about 30 to 50 women in attendance, and from then it's just grown tremendously.
So basically, how do you get the word out? How do you network to get these women in social media, and where you then get them in a space? You have to get the hall. Is there like a venue?
Yes. So the venues change often to keep things fun and interesting. The venues change. We've had 5 events. We've wanted to do more, but time. So I work in online media. I'm an editor and a producer, and I've worked for various publications. And Odun runs a tech company. So doing this it's a non-profit, so we usually use our money. So now we have sponsors that come on board for events. But we would find venues that work for us that were fun and intimate, and then we would approach the venue, and then we would just get some wine, set up the place, chairs, tables.
Strictly wine?
Strictly wine. We have water, we had juice for people who don't drink, but if you're coming to Wine and Whine, you expect to have a glass of wine. And so that's how we pick the venues, depending on
So what kind of conversations then occur when there's a Wine and Whine event?
So because there is wine, people feel very open, which is great. In general, the women are always keen to talk. I think I've noticed that everybody wants a safe space to say things that when they say on social media, they get dragged. First of all, we're a feminist organization. We're very feminist. And as your reaction tells me, the feminism is perceived as this bad thing, when in fact it's really about no, not from you, but from people online. And when the idea is really just equality.
Is it spelled out that you're a feminist?
Oh yes, it's very clear. We put it in we have shirts that we sell and or give out to people. It's clearly feminist, and we put it in our messaging.
Okay.
And so when people come
that
here,
means it's a strictly men are never going to be allowed into Wine and Wine.
Well, the idea is that it's a women's only event.
Yeah.
For it to be a safe space,
Yeah,
it has to be for women only, because I think a lot of women feel that they can't say things that they really feel around other people. Sometimes older people, sometimes men. So the conversations, like you said, that we have are around various things from sexual assault in the workplace, sexual harassment, which is a big issue obviously that we have in Nigeria, as we've seen from loads of documentaries and all of that. We talk about financial literacy, which is really important, because we really believe that for you to really be free, you have to be financially independent from people. And I think a lot of women don't have that, which is why sometimes they are forced to stay in situations that they don't want to. So we preach a lot about that, and we give classes on that. And then we've also had an event on self-defense, because there was a time when people were talking about, getting ride-hailing platforms and getting assaulted in them, and wanting to know, well, how can I protect myself? Obviously, you shouldn't have to, but this is the reality. So we were able to get a self-defense instructor to teach the women basically some basic self-defense.
Well, it looks like there's a lot of activities that go on.
We might try to theme them monthly.
When this Wine and Wine occurs. So I'm wondering, what's the demographic of the women who then attend? You said your first event had about, or the last one had about 30 to 50.
The first one was 30 to 50.
What kind of women come? Is it an all-exclusive club? Is it working women? Is it younger women, older women? Is it business class or certain industry types of women? Tell us more about the. So
our demographic is roughly 18 to 35. They're usually on social media. So how we raise awareness for our events, first of all, is social media.
Okay, so basically you expect anyone who then makes it, they will be social media savvy.
They will be, well, or at least on social media.
At least on social media.
Yes, and have a brief, at least an interest in women empowerment, feminism, or just in general, like improving mental and emotional health for women. So they tend to be 18 to 35. Some are in school, some are working. Some might be young moms, so it's a nice mix. In terms
what about the married?
The married. We have married women, we have single women, we have those dating. We have a bunch of women, and so sometimes some of the conversations are around relationships and dating, and handling that in Nigeria. The pressure to get married, it's a big conversation, and that's why I said it's a safe space, because a lot of young women, there's a lot of pressure to get married. So conversations they can't have with their parents, or they can't have with other friends who are perhaps they feel very obsessed with marriage. They can have there and say, okay, well, I actually don't want to, or I'm scared to get married. So that's the demographic. In terms of the class, we try to make sure that our events aren't super, one class of people. We try to make it a nice mix, whether lower class, middle class, but often they're university educated or working professionals. So in that sense, they would probably have a degree. And come for that. So what we do try to do is support other charities, because we're not fully a charity, to raise money. So we've raised money for Stand to End Rape. We've raised money for free sanitary aid. And what they do is sanitary aid for Nigerian girls. What they do is give free sanitary aid to poorer women in IDP camps or just marginalized communities. So because we are kind of, a lower middle class to middle class group, the women are really looking for support, not so much financial aid. So we do try to raise some sort of money, whether Odunayo myself or through the events, to give to those other charities that do that work.
It sounds like a lot does go down to putting this event together and getting the women in there, for this safe space, and to not just drink wine, but also wine. So and create change, which has been what's the biggest topic that is talked about from the events that's held so far at Wine and Whine? What's the most crucial, I won't say painstaking, but that gets people riled up, basically, because you're drinking wine and you're supposed to also whine and vent about it. So what gets thrown in the air and everyone sighs or goes, oh, okay?
I think two big topics are, one is definitely sexual harassment, sexual assault, catcalling, being able to go to the market and be left alone to buy your goods without anyone harassing you. Harassment in the workplace, that's always a big conversation. Harassment from random people in the streets, and that's really, really sad. Another conversation really is about what we call the gatekeepers of patriarchy, which tends to be older people who, when you try and explain to them about, the issues that you're having as a young person, they either shut you down or say, oh, in my time, I already dealt with this, so you should be used to it. So people who,
older women, more specific.
Men and women, actually, both. Older women in the workplace sometimes who, you know, make younger women feel that, oh yeah, your skirt is too short, or you're doing this, or you should, you know, be a certain kind of way, or, you know, whatever it is. And also older men who perhaps also do the exact same thing. So both really. It's sometimes about the older.
You know, two topics that, you know, really gets people.
Two topics that really get, that we've had a lot of people talk about, like, how do I deal with this old man or old woman in my office that is basically making my life hell? And then definitely sexual harassment.
Wow, it sounds like
it's deep, which is why the wine and the music and the fun is needed to just make people feel happy.
You also, you know, run the digital media space, creative publications, you know, for Nigerian millennials. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so like I said, my background is as an editor and a producer. So I've worked with a foray of digital media publications, Zikoko, Konbini, which was a French media publication that came into Nigeria in 2016, and I ran it for 2 years. I then worked for CNN Africa as a social producer briefly. I worked for a women's publication called Zumi as well. So I've had a lot of experience with millennials, as a millennial myself. That's a demographic that I know a lot about, and obviously Generation Z, which is the generation just after the millennials. So that's basically my background.
And you're also quoted in an article recently that talks about, yes, quote, it's difficult being a woman in Nigeria because the system is rigged against me and my gender. Could you
expand on that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of looking at the legal and political system that we have in place. I mean, in 2019, only 7 women were on the president's ministerial list. And we're praising that, and we're saying, wow, great, 7 women, but 7 out of 43 is really tiny, when the population is almost 50-50 roughly. So the involvement of and the inclusion of women in different spaces, political, legal, business spaces, is limited. The amount of women that are directors or on the boards of companies globally is limited, but even in Nigeria, so much so. So it's hard for, if you don't have enough women in the House of Reps, enough women in the, you know, systems that can actually create change, how do we expect there to be change? You need to see people like you to make that change. You know, we always ask for representation globally to see more black people, more people of color. Well, in Nigeria, we need to see more women. And so it already feels like there is a rigged system. I mean, in only 2019, we still haven't passed the gender equality bill. We're just passing a bill on sexual harassment in universities because of a documentary that came out, which had to show that it happens. And, you know, women have been talking about this for decades, and people still don't believe. So you feel like it is rigged against you. You know, the system is unfair.
So, in your opinion, what can be done?
I think the first step, as I said, is to include more women in public office, and the right women. It's not just to elect anybody, but there are many qualified people. I guess it's across Nigeria in general. We need to see more qualified people in office, both men and women. But for women, there's not enough of them. There are not enough women in public office. We need to see more of that. For us to have change, we've never had a female vice president. We've never had a female president. We've barely had a female governor. That would help.
Yeah, but I think there's quite a few female deputy governors.
We've had deputy governors
and a couple of states.
But that's not enough. You know, for the fact that we have to say, okay, deputy governors, I think we've had less than 10 overall. And there's some states that haven't had a woman in public office, particularly in the north, since probably the
why public offices?
Because, well, we need lawmakers and we need policymakers and we need change on that level. People like me who use media, we can raise awareness. And everybody needs to play their part. So me and you who are working in this media space, we now need to raise awareness for the issues. We need to do these documentaries and these videos to show that this is a problem. Then we need the lawmakers to put it into play. And then we need more women in corporate offices, more women in healthcare, more women in every field. Not just saying, okay, women should be at home or women should be in only this field. Women should be in tech.
Many will quote figures about, you know, having more women now in the workforce, especially in the urban areas like Lagos. You find lots of women holding offices, but clearly getting jobs in the corporate sector.
What level? That's the problem.
Basically, staffing and co. But it's a huge change than what it was in the 90s and the 80s. That's for sure.
Definitely, there has been a change. It's not to say that we don't see.
You look at the classrooms. Definitely, you know, they have more girls than boys.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the women before me, of course. But I have to also set a precedence for the women coming after me. And so we have to keep pushing for equality. We can say, okay, well done, we did that before, but how can we get to another place faster and quicker? Why it shouldn't take us 20 years or 10 years to get more women in
should it? Because it's taken lots of years for men to have all these positions. So how do we shift this narrative in less than less than 3 decades, since all the waves of, women's activism, not just protests, but also fighting to get women on the front burner. You look at Western countries, in the 1940s, we had the suffragettes.
Yes.
So they are just coming out of their own. Yes, they have made huge strides. But let's come back down to West Africa, to Africa specifically, where they will say there's cultural norms, there's this, and there's religion, and there's that. And just like you said, the goddess of patriarchy. Would you agree? And I'd like to put this question to you, that there are more women who are custodians of patriarchy now than more than ever before.
I don't think now more than ever before. I think a part of it, like you said, they say cultural norms, but it's really why I would say colonial norms. Because if we look at our past and our history, we've had women doing various things. I think it's not that they're more now than ever. I think maybe we speak about it a lot more. I think they're just as many as they probably were before. But I don't really blame women like that. I think that they're trying to survive in a system that already doesn't favor them. So when you're already in a system that doesn't work for you, you might either just try to go along with the misogyny because you feel like it's easier to thrive that way than to rebel and kick.
Because you mentioned about even older women telling younger women, oh, we've been past it, so just carry on.
It's what they know.
Carry on.
It's what they know, and it's sad. It's like, so if an older woman...
You can't go beyond what you know.
Exactly, but it's still a byproduct of the patriarchy, and it's not to say that this doesn't affect men. We talk about toxic masculinity too. And men, if only men would realize more so that feminism and liberating of all the sexes would actually help them too. There'll be less pressure to be emotionally stunted or to be the only provider, It does benefit everybody if everybody is actually for the progression of women, because it actually relieves a lot of pressure from one gender, and it also gives room and opportunity for both. So it's not to say that our ideas are just for. I personally, I advocate for women, but I think that there should be more men in spaces pushing against toxic masculinity and pushing as allies to support women.
Or perhaps more men, driving the narrative and the conversation that will have more women, to move forward.
We can't do it alone. And across the world, whatever our skin color, our race, our religion, we can't do things alone. So we need support.
Well, thank you very much, Damilola, for coming on. And just before we know, future of Wine and Whine, how long do we continue to drink wine and wine?
So now we're having an event at the end of this month, which is an all-girl party. It's one of the new things we're doing, which is a women-only party. And we're planning to do this quarterly. And next year, we're planning to try and go beyond that, because people have asked for us to have events in Abuja, in Paris, and London. So we're trying to figure out the technology to bring those women in, either to do it online or to have those events in other places.
Well, all I can say, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
carry on with the wine. And also with the whining, quite a mix. Drinking wine and whining, oh my God. I think I'll drink wine and I'll just relax.
Yeah,